You won't believe how quickly this climate expert crumbled under pressure.
Who invited you here today?
I came with Protect Our Winters.
Right. But you're here on behalf of the Democrats or the Republicans?
I'm here on behalf of the outdoor enthusiasts around America.
Okay. You were contacted by Senator Whitehouse's staff?
I personally came with Protect Our Winters, so I don't know how that went exactly.
What is carbon dioxide?
I went to high school, but that's carbon dioxide is a gas.
Okay.
I'm not a professional to talk about carbon dioxide so much, but
Well, you want us to abolish it, right?
no, there's always going to be carbon dioxide.
Right. So what is it you want us to do? Let me back up, because I want to, I mean, you're here as an expert. Tell me more about what carbon dioxide is.
I'm here as an expert cross-country skier who sees the changes in my winters and the landscape that I live in Alaska. And so carbon dioxide is what I see it as is, it's a gas that exists in our atmosphere. And
Is it the major part of our atmosphere? Or?
It's a huge part of our atmosphere, yes.
It's actually a very small part of our atmosphere.
Well, okay. But, yeah, I don't know. What are you asking specifically?
Well, you said we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. I'd like to know first if you know what it is. You want us to abolish fossil fuels?
I never said that.
You never have said that?
No.
Okay. What do you think we ought to do with fossil fuels?
What will we do with fossil fuels?
Yeah. Should we make any changes?
I would like to see a decrease in the use of fossil fuels. I think there's a possibility to use more electric generation.
Okay. Over what period of time? 10 years, 50 years, 100 years?
That's not, I would like to see it come as fast as possible while continuing.
How fast?
Sorry?
How fast?
I don't have a
You
great
don't
answer
know?
for that, no.
Okay. You just think, well, how much will it cost for us to become carbon neutral in the United States by 2050?
I'm not a professional on that. I don't have an answer.
You don't have any idea?
No.
You just think we ought to spend the money?
I'm not an economist.
Yeah, but it's going to cost money. You realize that?
Yeah, but we've also talked about the trade-off of what the cost of climate change as emergencies will cost in the future also. So.
Right, but it's going to cost trillions of dollars to become carbon neutral by 2050, right?
I do not know.
You don't know. You just think we ought to do it.
I don't have a great answer for you, but I think
Okay.
I would. Like
If
to
we
see fewer
spent
carbon
if we spent those trillions of dollars and became carbon neutral by 2050 in the United States, which you advocate, how much will it reduce world temperatures?
I don't have an answer for that.
You don't know?
No.
You just think we ought to spend the money and then see what happens?
I think as an athlete, I think if we spend that money and invest in our future, hopefully those temperatures stop rising and maybe the snow at least stabilizes where it is for me. But yeah, I don't think anyone knows for sure. I don't know anyway.
Well, when my colleagues invite witnesses to come to us to tell us, advise us on passing legislation, I always check out the background of our witnesses because I like to know who I'm talking to. I checked yours out, Mr. Schumacher, and I want to be sure I understand it as I evaluate your testimony. On June 8, 2020, you tweeted, I'm going to quote, "The war on drugs was intentionally created to incarcerate black people en masse," end quote. The war on drugs, you said, was intentionally created to incarcerate black people en masse. Who intentionally created the war on drugs to put black people in jail? Who were you talking about?
I don't remember typing that.
You don't?
No.
It's on your Twitter feed.
Maybe a retweet. I don't know. I haven't used that in a while.
Well,
Also,
even
it
if
doesn't
it's a
seem like
retweet, it shows your support, right?
Maybe, yeah. But it's not the topic of this conversation.
Right, right. But it has to do with, you're here giving us advice, and I just kind of like to know a little bit more about your point
Yeah,
of view.
I'm here as an athlete giving you my story and what I've seen in my field.
On August 27th of 2020, you tweeted this, quote, I'm going to quote, "Police are paid with taxpayer dollars. If they are not answerable to us, we can demand new service, and that's what this is. Abolish the police in favor of that new service," end quote. You think we ought to abolish the police, do you?
Again, not the topic I'm here to talk about today.
I know, but you tweeted it. Do you think we ought to abolish the police?
That's not what I'm here to talk about.
Should we do that before or after we get rid of fossil fuels?
I'm not going to address that. That's,
You don't want to address it? Okay. Let me ask you about one more of your tweets. On August 26, 2020, you tweeted, there's a picture, I'm not going to describe the picture, but you said, quote, your words, not mine, it's on your Twitter feed, quote, "This is what systemic racism looks like. The Los Angeles Police Department is literally policing only the Black Lives Matter side," end quote. What'd you mean by that?
This is still off topic.
No, it's not. You're here as an expert telling us, advising us, and I'm asking you about your background.
I'm here as an athlete to talk about the effects of climate change on my sport.
Okay, let's go back. Well, I'm almost out of time.
Senator, you're well out of time, and we have other senators waiting, so please
Okay.
wrap up when you have a moment.
All right. Thank you all for your testimony. Mr. Doe, as I understand your testimony, you're saying that at some point climate change is going to cause municipal bonds to default. Is that right?
No, I would say that they will be under pressure just because there'll be increased budgetary concerns.
Well,
So
can
they're-
they withstand that pressure?
I think so.
Then
Yes.
what's the problem?
Problem is that there might be a higher interest rate if there are issues that aren't addressed by state and local governments, that if, because of, let's just say, in anticipation of extreme weather events.
So
that
you're worried
waters-
that interest rates will go up?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking on your website. You say, my quote, I'm quoting now, "Contribution to the municipal industry has been extensive as an analyst, strategist, and visionary of the industry's future," close quote. So I want to tap your visionary expertise. At what point do you think climate change is going to cause interest rates on municipal bonds to rise to the point that the interest rates will be prohibitive? When will all this happen?
Well, I'll dust my crystal ball off, but perhaps, I think in 10 to 20 years.
10 to 20 years, okay. What do you think we ought to do about it?
I think we ought to be able to identify where infrastructure is most vulnerable to weather events, and that infrastructure is then, appropriate dollars are used to modernize infrastructure. For example, in the town of Marshfield,
I want to cut you off because I don't have
Sure.
much time. You think we ought to spend money?
wisely and appropriately.
Okay, sure. Well, nobody around here ever stands up and says, I've got a good idea and I don't need to spend money unwisely and inappropriately. You
Correct.
understand that, right?
I do.
Okay. Do you support the world becoming carbon neutral by 2050? Would that solve, do you support that?
I don't think that's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, but if it were, do you support it?
Doesn't seem like it's a bad thing.
Okay. Do you support the United States becoming carbon neutral by 2050?
This may not be possible.
But do you support it?
If it were the right mix of power and energy in order to provide the electricity that's needed for essential needs,
Well, you do
Yes.
understand that that's the goal of the most ardent proponents of climate change, do you not?
I do understand that.
Okay. How much will that cost?
I couldn't give a figure to that because it's outside my area of expertise on that.
You think we ought to just start spending money without an understanding of how much it's going to cost?
I don't think that's ever wise.
Okay. Well, don't you think we ought to look into how much it's going to cost?
Again, that's around that area. That's not an area of expertise. I'm really focused on addressing the updating of infrastructure for our state and local governments.
You don't seem to have very many solutions. Except what I take away from your testimony is that climate change is going to cause interest rates to rise on municipal bonds, so at some point the cost will become prohibitive, and we need to spend money on infrastructure to stop it. Where do you think this money should come from?
I think state and local governments have the capacity to borrow because the rates are significantly low, and there's an opportunity now to do so and be proactive.
So you think state and local governments ought to borrow the money?
I do. I think they have the capacity to do so.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of car do you drive?
I drive a Jeep Wagoneer.
Is it gas or electric?
It's gas.
Okay. Do you have a gas stove?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have a heat pump?
I do not.
You don't?
I do not.
Oh, okay. How big a house do you live in?
I live in a condominium of 853 square feet.
Okay. I'm over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.